counselor, and he'll be dearly missed. I'll call this meeting to order. The very first order of business will be an added item. We're going to move down to added items. The meeting's already called to order. Okay, so added items. I would like to move item 6C up under 5B for the purpose of having Mr. Teal here with us today. I'd ask council at this time if they have any further added items. Seeing none, then we will ask for an adoption of the agenda as amended. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that we adopt the agenda for Monday, March 28th, 2022 as amended.
Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And now to item 2A, regular council meeting minutes of March 14. A motion on the floor, please. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that we adopt the regular council meeting minutes from March 14th, 2022 as presented.
Does council have any errors or omissions? Seeing none then, I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item 3A, delegation, pulmonary hypertension proclamation for May 5th. And I would ask at this time who will be introducing our guest. Go ahead.
I'll turn that to our Acting Community Services Director, Michelle Larocque, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. This is a proclamation request to proclaim May 5th as World Pulmonary Hypertension Day, and we have Maureen Harper with us today to tell us a little bit about it.
Good evening. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Maureen Harper, and I'm here today to ask to have the town office lit up in purple on May the 5th for World Pulmonary Hypertension Day. Most people have never heard of pulmonary hypertension until they or a family member are diagnosed with it. I have a few slides to help explain the basics of pulmonary hypertension.
I was just waiting for the photographer.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just need to grab this out of your way.
Sure. You can scroll the next one. What is PH? Pulmonary hypertension is a lung disease characterized by increased pressures in the pulmonary arteries. PH is progressive, meaning its symptoms get worse over time. The earlier PH is diagnosed, the better care patients receive to improve the quality of life and long-term health. PH worsens over time. Earlier diagnosis is important so that treatment can be started as early as possible to lessen symptoms and stop the disease progression. 75% of patients have advanced PH when they are diagnosed. Currently in Canada, it takes more than 2 years for a patient to be diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension. Here we see the 5 different groups of PH along with some commonly associated causes for each subgroup. The World Health Organization, also known as WHO, has classified PH into 5 subgroups. WHO Group 1 is pulmonary arterial hypertension, often is idiopathic, which means we don't know what caused it. Group 2 is associated with left-sided heart disease. Group 3 is associated with lung disease. Group 4 is chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. It's caused by blood clots in the lungs. And group 5 is caused by various other diseases, so it's a secondary disease. Symptoms that are similar across different conditions and diseases are considered non-specific symptoms. Because the symptoms of PH are also associated with other more common diseases, such as asthma, PH is often misdiagnosed. Common PH symptoms are labored breathing, fatigue, exercise intolerance, edema, specifically of the ankles, feet, or legs, chest pain, blueness tint to the skin, fainting, lightheadedness upon exertion, and clinical signs of right-sided heart disease. For comparison, common symptoms of asthma are shortness of breath, chest pain, trouble sleeping, and whistling or wheezing with exhaling and coughing. So very similar to PH. PH is often mistaken early on for other conditions and diseases, so it's important to recognize its symptoms. Common misdiagnoses include asthma, COPD, chronic fatigue, anxiety, obesity, and coronary artery disease. Risk factors associated with PH. Gender. Many types of PH are more common in women than in men. For example, the REVEAL registry found that the ratio of pulmonary arterial hypertension, so group 1, in women to men was 4.3 to 1. The reason for this prevalence in women is unknown. Age. PH can strike at any time, from birth to late in life, but most commonly in middle-aged people. Family history. Some forms of PH are more common in families such as hereditary pulmonary arterial hypertension. Thus, family history of PH or premature cardiac death should be prompt assessment for PH, especially when symptoms of PH are present. Associated conditions. There are many conditions and illnesses associated and an increased risk of developing PH. These include patients with history of heart disease, lung disease, liver disease, HIV infections, and other connective tissue diseases. Pregnancy. Pregnancy is commonly associated with worsening of a pre-existing PH due to the strain inflicted upon the body, specifically the lungs and the heart. Additionally, in some women, PH symptoms first become apparent during pregnancy. Altitude. Living at a high altitude is a risk for PH. Lower environmental oxygen levels and high altitude can lead to chronic blood hypoxia, which causes pulmonary vasoconstriction, leading to the development of PH. Obesity. Obesity is associated with several conditions that which increases the risk of PH. Obesity is a significant cause of heart disease, which commonly leads to PH. Moreover, sleep apnea is more common in obese patients and is also a risk factor for PH. Pulmonary embolisms. Patients with a history of pulmonary embolisms are at risk for the form of PH known as chronic thrombolytic pulmonary hypertension, or CTEPH. PH is also suspected in patients who experience persistent dyspnea or exercise limitation despite long-term anticoagulation, so blood thinners. Following the episode of pulmonary emboli, especially multiple or recurrent emboli. Drugs. Patients treated with some kinds of drugs, including chemotherapy drugs for cancer and certain diet drugs, are at higher risk for PH. Additionally, use of recreational drugs such as meth or codeine is becoming more common cause of PH. Patients and healthcare workers often don't recognize the symptoms of PH as indicative of a serious disease. 51% of patients reported that their family doctor did not recognize the symptoms of PH. Patients downplay major symptoms, sometimes suffering with breathlessness, fatigue, and irregular heartbeats for months or years before seeking medical attention. For many, the time from first symptoms to diagnosis is longer than 2 years. More than half these patients have moderate to severe PH at diagnosis. Burden of illness. 2021 PH Canada survey revealed significant burden for Canadians affected by PH. Physical limitations and reduced quality of life, social isolation and relationship issues, decreased employment or income, delays in proper diagnosis, and insufficient treatment options. So, burden of illness. So, the slide has one of our other PH patients, so I thought I'd tell you my story. So, I was diagnosed with PH almost 5 years ago. It started with a strange lump in my leg that looked infected. So after 6 weeks of oral antibiotics, 6 days of IV antibiotics, and 2 biopsies, the doctors determined it was not an infection and sent me to a dermatologist. The dermatologist thought it was scleroderma, so he sent me for a few tests, including a chest x-ray. The chest x-ray revealed an enlarged pulmonary trunk. That sent me off to the cardiologist. The cardiologist put me on the treadmill to do a stress test. So on the stress test, my heart did just fine. It was happy as could be. My oxygen levels just tanked. They couldn't keep my oxygen high enough. So he sent me for a VQ scan, which is a scan looking for blood clots in the lungs. He was flabbergasted by the amount of blood clots I currently have in my lungs. So he sent me to the pulmonologist with a, I don't know what to do with you. Here you go. So the pulmonologist ran some tests. In August the 10th of 2017, I was officially diagnosed with CTEPH. CTEPH is the only form of PH that is curable. It requires opening the chest and cleaning the blood clots out of the lungs. So I have a big scar down my chest, kind of like open heart surgery, and they go in and they clean out the blood clots. In Canada, it is only performed in Toronto and Ottawa. So I got to spend 11 days in Toronto in the hospital. It was a lovely hospital. It's the only thing I got to see while I was there. Unfortunately, my surgery was deemed unsuccessful, and I still have CTEPH. On top of that, I was also diagnosed with group 1, which is the pulmonary arterial hypertension, and they don't know the cause of that. So my doctor felt even if the CTEPH had been cured, I'd still have PH. I'm living with fatigue and shortness of breath as my major symptoms. Due to my low oxygen, I am now on oxygen therapy 24/7. My only hope for a cure at this point is a double lung transplant, but I'm not sick enough to be considered for that yet. I'm very lucky that I am able to continue work and to continue volunteering with my community. So some PH resources, support and education. So PH Canada is fantastic. They're the main support for our community, working on getting us education and kits when you're firstly diagnosed and you have no idea what this is, because if you Google PH, it's terrifying. Okay, and then thank you for listening and being willing to learn about pulmonary hypertension today. I hope you are willing to consider lighting up the town office for Purple and World Pulmonary Hypertension Day on May the 5th.
Thank
Any
you very
questions?
much for sharing your story.
No problem.
I'd like to ask administration at this time if we have anything planned to light any part of our town of Olds in purple. Michelle, Mr. Larocque?
Thank you. I did speak with the operations manager, and it is something that we are able to do.
Would you be able to share whereabouts that would be, or or will it be shared with the public at the time?
We would share that with the public at the time. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much once again, Maureen, for your story.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
You're a very courageous woman. I would like to ask for a motion at this time, please. Councillor Wilson?
I will make the motion that the town of Olds proclaim May 5th, 2022 World Pulmonary Hypertension Day and light up the town administration office in purple.
Any further questions anyone has for Maureen before she leaves? Very good. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Once again, thank you for your time and sharing. Very educational. All right, ladies and gentlemen, number 4, business arising out of the minutes. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, page 20 of your agenda, please. And that will be Bylaw 2022-01, Municipal Development Plan, and Bylaw 2022-02, the Land Use Bylaw. Consideration for first reading and to set joint public hearings. And I would ask at this time our acting CAO, who will speak to this.
Great, thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. Craig Teal from Parkland Community Planning Services to speak to this bylaw.
Welcome to the podium, Mr. Teal.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Already breaking the podium tools and equipment. So The purpose of the first two, well, the two bylaws relate to the annexation area. And one is definitely, the first one dealing with the MDP, 2022-01 is somewhat of a housekeeping item. It literally takes the boundary shown on the current MDP maps and extends them out around the three-quarter sections that have been added to the town's jurisdiction. And that is the sole extent of the changes. So that's what we mean by a housekeeping item. And the second bylaw, actually, maybe I just ask you to stop on the map that goes with the annexation area for the second bylaw, 2022-02, a little bit more substantive. This one is taking the lands that have been annexed and replacing the county's bylaw with the town's bylaw. So moving out of the county's ag district typically to what we call the urban reserve, which is our equivalent of an agricultural district. Whenever we inherit lands from another municipality, we also inherit their rules and regulations until such time as we, as a town, formally changes those. And this is starting the process for that. It also it leads to what we call kind of a translation exercise. We have to relate the things were approved previously under the county's land use bylaw to how we're going to try to accommodate those under the town's land use bylaw so that we honor the obligation that we made to the landowners at the time of annexation that, number one, their taxes won't be changed as a result of this kind of redesignation or zoning change, and that their existing uses will be able to be honored and they'd be able to continue on. So in that light, the area that's impacted, you can see on the screen, for the most case, urban reserve uses that are already listed in the town's bylaw would accommodate things like a house or agriculture. But there's a few interesting things that are out there on the landscape already approved. So we're proposing also to add a specific use that basically says anything that has a duly authorized development permit by the county prior to the date annexation took effect, January 1 of this year. And then we have another parcel that all of you are familiar with as a county yard right off Highway 2A that is not likely to undergo any changes, but we do want to be able to deal with development permits from time to time. So the urban reserve doesn't really do well with a public works shop, and we're proposing to add to the urban reserve district for that particular site what we call the public and quasi-public use definition. And that's what we use for our own shop, the town's own operational center in the IB district in the West End. So with that, Your Worship, sorry, there is one third item the bylaw, the LUB change is trying to accommodate. If you could just scroll to the next map, please. A little bit more housekeeping and cleanup since we're going through the effort of having a bylaw and a public hearing. We're also cleaning up some urban reserve work on a parcel just on the other side of the railway tracks. So it was actually annexed last time round in 2006, switching from an acreage that has kind of three multiple zonings on it right now that was part of the Discovery Plains initiative. Those landowners are no longer working together, so we're trying to clean that up to put the landowner back into a single designation under urban reserve at their request as well, and consent. So with that, Your Worship, I recommend first reading of each of the two bylaws and also setting, if I remember my date, Monday, April 25th, 2022 at 1 o'clock here in Council Chambers as a date, time, and place for a public hearing on the two bylaws. And we are recommending a joint public hearing for the purpose, given that we're largely dealing with the same geographic area flowing from the annexation.
Very well. At this time, I'm going to open the floor to council members if they have any questions for you, Mr. Teal. Was very well presented. Very good. Then, for your time, we are going to move to first reading for bylaw 2022-01. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council gives first reading to the bylaw 2022-01.
Questions? We're good. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. And for this side, I'd ask for first reading for 2022-02. Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, I'd like to give reading, council gives first reading to bylaw number 2022-02.
Again, any questions? I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Now looking for public hearing dates. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council sets Monday, April 25th, 2022 at 1 p.m. in council chambers as the date, time, and place for public hearing for bylaw number 2022-21 and bylaw number 2022-02.
Very good. Legislative clerk.
Excuse me, friendly amendment with Councillor Daly. I believe he said 2022-21, and it should be 01 and 02.
Sorry, Thank you for a good catch.
Okay, let the record show 2022-01, 2022-02. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Your Worship. So is this during our regular council meeting scheduled at the exact same time in the exact same place? Okay, thank you.
You. Any further questions? I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And I believe you're on the agenda for 5B as well, for the public hearing?
I am, Your Worship. I just can't remember the order of the things that you...
Okay, I've got you on for
Pretty sure I'm
the...
the first up to speak.
Yeah, you bet. We'll do this item, and then we'll move down to your item that was moved up on the agenda, so. Okay, we're considering bylaw 2022-05, amendment to the land use bylaw 0123 for a public hearing and consideration for second and third reading. Would you like me to continue for, yes?
Yes.
Mayor Dahl, you need to open the public hearing with that.
Right, I was
Yeah.
just going to ask him if he'd like me just to move forward and continue the
I
public
guess we'll
hearing.
call that recommendation number 1 on the top of the RFD.
Okay, thank you. Sounds good. Section 172 of the MGA says that we must take part in discussion and decision-making on any matter in which you have pecuniary interest. The legislation attempts to ensure that you are not discriminated at any times by virtue of your membership of council. If any of you feel you do have a pecuniary interest, please let us know. You are not to be discriminated against or entitled to participate in public hearings as a member of the public. I found my, this is the first time I'm going to use this. I hereby declare the public hearing open. I would ask the development officer, Mr. Teal Craig, to explain the purpose and any effects of the proposed bylaw. Mr. Teal?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Actually, if I could just ask the clerk to scroll to the page that has the air photo. I'll speak mostly to that. So the purpose of this bylaw is to take a property that's designated DC7, which is a specific district the council created to deal with cannabis-related manufacturing, and to move it back to the industrial light. I say move it back because, well, several years ago, they moved it to DC7 as we were getting the wave of interest in cannabis production. Now the interest is in a manufacturing type industry, which fits in the definition of industrial I1. And doesn't fall within the DC7. So the request is that, on the behest of the applicant and the current owner of the property that you can see highlighted in yellow on your screen. It is in the southeast industrial area. It's identified for future industrial. The town's MDP also identifies it for industrial. And while the current proposal is linked to more manufacturing light, literally a manufacturing plant, it's important to remember what industrial light allows. It does allow for other things like the Hypro plant that's in that vicinity, the Forest Yards that's to the north, or even some of the oil field service type of uses that you see in that particular area. So that full range has to be considered. But that said, planning staff have no concerns whatsoever with this particular application. It's literally going back to where we were in an area that we have planned for industrial. Your Worship, we did have a late set of comments that came in. I do believe I can introduce those at this stage, or at least putting them out on your desk. You should have found a list of comments from Alberta Transportation. So their comment sheet came in after the point where you had to submit the RFD for the agenda. And in a nutshell, they are indicating that they don't have any opposition to the proposal, although they do take every opportunity to remind us that whenever we have any development in the town of Olds that may generate traffic, that the town is responsible for fixing any impact on the provincial highway. So yeah, all the kind of normal correspondence from that department. Your Worship, I don't know if anyone was in, we've had no public input leading up to the hearing, as opposed to, other than the applicant who has an interest in getting it approved. And I'm not sure if we have anyone here today in the gallery who's interested to speak to this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teal. At this time, I'd ask our legislative clerk, do we have anybody sitting on virtual? No? For that purpose, then, we should be able to just move forward. There's no sense in me going through the motions. We don't have, oh, is there a gentleman here? Thank you for your attendance. If that's the case, we we have confirmed that we have no one to speak, so we will move along. I'll start with council at this time. Do you have any questions? I only have one question. I know of the area to be an old slough. Do we have anything about water diversion for that area?
We, in terms of slough and water diversion, we now call wetlands under the provincial wetland policy. And certainly that will be addressed at the time of development permit. That's actually a separate, it does interact with the town's approval process and subdivisions and development permits. But first and foremost, the landowners have to spend a fair amount of time with Alberta Environment and Parks to see, number one, are they going to have an impact on a wetland, or are they going to work around and maintain what's already there? And for those that are wondering, if you're looking at the air photo, it's kind of the darkish spot in the lower left of the yellow box. And even the class in that is left to Alberta Environment and Parks. And then the landowner has some options. If they work around it, then they're not having an impact, so they're not diverting it. Although the diversion issue does mean that they have to still feed it with water, otherwise the wetland will literally dry up and die. Or if they wish to replace it, they have to go through all the steps to get approval from Alberta Parks, Alberta Environment and Parks, to basically pay compensation to replace that wetland somewhere else within the basin that Olds is in, which is a very, very large basin, stretching, actually. I don't think we might make it to Saskatchewan for the size of our basin, to be honest. So it doesn't mean that the wetland will be replaced to necessarily local. So at this stage, Mayor Dahl, we don't know which of those options the landowner, who is ultimately going to be developing the property, will choose to take.
Have it under control, I can hear very well. No further questions then. I'd call that second reading for bylaw 2022-05. Oh, sorry, I got it. Sorry. This is my first one in 4 years, so thank you very much. Okay, if council has no further comments, which I've asked, do you have any further comments as the development officer?
I do not, Your Worship.
Very good. I declare the public hearing closed. At the time, all right, 1:27, thank you. And I will then ask now for a second reading of bylaw 2022-05. Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, I move that council gives second reading to bylaw number 2022-05.
Council have any further questions for Mr. Teal? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. And now I would like third and final reading for 2022-05, please. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 2022-05.
And I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. At this point, we'll move item 6C, Development Permit DP 22006 up, and Mr. Teal can deal with that item.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So I'm going to ask that maybe we'll focus our effort on the air photo again for this one. Your Worship, direct control districts are kind of a unique element in the land use bylaw. Council doesn't deal with any development permits directly, but this particular direct control district, DC3, is one of those areas where, for this particular property, only council can make a decision on a development permit. There's no delegation to MPC or staff. So what you see before you is a development permit approval for this particular site. This particular site has its own direct control district from 2006 approximately, when it was proposed to be a bed and breakfast, and the solution adopted at that time was to put it under direct control. I guess bed and breakfast was new enough that there was some concern about how it would fit, and that is one of the reasons why we have the direct control district. That being said, it still allows other uses like a regular garage and detached dwelling, which is what's on the property currently. And the landowner has applied to expand the size of their detached garage, which you can see, it would be on the left-hand side. It's a little bit hard through the trees of on the air photo up on the screen. It'd be in the upper right part of that yellow box that you see on the screen. The site plans and a little bit some pictures of the site are also available. Maybe we can actually go to the picture of the garage. Right, that's good. Okay, so on the screen now you see the existing garage, which a few years back was given a relaxation to have a rear yard closer to the park, less than the 3 feet, the 1 meter distance that the land use bylaw ordinarily calls for. The proposed addition will maintain that same rear yard of about 0.57 meters, and it'll be kind of behind, from the perspective of the photo, of the existing structure that you're looking on the photo, and kind of forming a 90-degree bend. The landowner has provided some hand-drawn renditions, and the development officer has confirmed with them that the intended roof peak of the addition, even though in your package you see it's a little bit higher than the existing, is intended to be matching the existing peak that you see on that photo at about 17 feet, measuring from grade to peak. The garage itself will be a little bit larger than what we're normally allowed to have, around 700 square feet. But in comparison, a typical other R1, and any other property that's in the R1 district, which in this particular case the neighbors of this property are, if they have a large enough parcel, they're allowed to go up to the 1,100 square foot mark. So the recommendation is that council give a relaxation to allow that same consideration that the neighboring R1 parcel would be able to benefit from. Beyond that, there are no other contradictions or anything afoul of the standards that council has set in terms of yard requirements or coverage or building size or height. And the recommendation is for approval, subject, and that is achieved by approving the development permit, the draft development permit that is attached to the back of the package on page 89 of your agenda package. And with that, Your Worship, I'd be happy to field any questions.
You. Can you just answer me why you're calling it a draft development permit? Will it possibly be changed by the...
I guess officially we call it a draft because it's been written by staff. If you approve it, we get rid of the draft part.
Very good. That was my question. Any further questions from council? Council Ryan, Council Cummings, and Council Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Mr. Teal, and thank you for your presentation, Mr. Teal, because I had thought that this was something totally different, and I thought that when I first read it, I was going to say, table this because I didn't have enough information, so I appreciate what you've said. Now, you're saying that the garage currently is just under 500 square feet, and they're looking to make it into 700 square feet?
You'll have to bear with me, Your Worship. Since I'm pitching in here, I don't have it quite as committed to memory as... Yeah, so it's a combined total. So it's right now around just a shy under 500 square feet. The addition would bring it up to the 1,100 square foot mark.
Up to 1,100, so that's more than double the size that it is right now.
Very much so, yeah.
Saying the neighboring property is already at that size?
The neighboring properties would have the privilege or the ability to make the same kind of application. And so that's where you see the last line on page 79 in the RFD. It says that in the R1 land use district, any parcels that are greater than 7,000 square meters, it's approximately 7,000 square feet. So when you get big 130 by, say, 65-foot frontage lots like these ones along 57th, they're allowed to have accessory building sizes bigger than other parcels that may be in the 50 to 120-foot range, around 6,000 square feet. So the recommendation is to give a variance for this parcel and treat it like one of those R1 properties. Technically, it is a variance because the direct control district doesn't specifically say that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teal.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Council Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is there a reason we're keeping this as a direct control and rather not just taking it back to an R1 zone like its neighbors?
Okay. Certainly, I think the development officer did have a chance to chat with the applicant, and I think my recommendation would be next time you do a land use bylaw review, this one very much should be considered, especially since bed and breakfasts have become a little bit more common, a little bit more familiar, not necessarily on this site because it wasn't developed. And I think the land use bylaw already has a different approach to bed and breakfast. Nonetheless, for this particular landowner, this is where they sit as of today, and they wish to get going with their sheds or their garage addition, so they're exercising their rights under the current zoning, which is their prerogative.
Thank you. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Development Officer Thiels. Why would we continue to ask for exceptions on the side yard allowances to build a new structure? and not have them comply with the older structure before they go ahead with the new structure.
So I think in terms of asking for the addition, we get to deal with the addition. We don't get to go back and revisit other things that are not part of the application. So because you apply for a garage, we don't get to say, hey, your house is too close, move it over. So the existing house still has a benefit, or sorry, the existing garage that's on the ground still has the benefit of a lawful development permit that was issued. The question for you as a development authority, though, is when you look at the addition, do you or do you not wish to give them the same consideration of that .57 side yard? And for the addition, that part's fair game. If you do decide that you wish to give a relaxation or variance, actually, we should be clearly stating that in the development permit. And consciously, you should be making a decision based on, so you have to basically do the same job the municipal planning commission or the development officer would have to, which means making sure that you're comfortable it won't interfere with anyone else's ability to use their property in a meaningful way, and that it still fits within the character and the overall look and appearance of the area. In speaking to that, in this particular case, that rear yard, that west yard that's been reduced from 1 meter to .57 for the existing garage, backs onto open space. It's a passive kind of a trail connector type park, so it's not backing right onto someone else's yard, and so it really doesn't cause that impact to a property owner across the way. And in terms of that missing 0.4 of a meter, it's hard to pick that out when you go down the street to say that it's influenced or affected the character. So if council is comfortable with that kind of assessment, then that's the basis that could be used for granting a relaxation to that rear yard requirement for the west property line for the addition. The existing garage is not up for being revisited.
Mr. Blatz?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Teals. So where on the west side, there is a fence there, correct? Already?
I believe there is. I'm not sure of our photos. Actually, it doesn't look like there is much of a fence behind the existing.
I don't think it's a very high fence, but I believe there is a fence there. Is there not, Justin?
There is a fence. I believe the back of the garage does constitute as the fence. Like the fence goes to the edge of the garage and then it starts. Yep.
Very good. Councillor Blatz? Okay.
Sorry, I was just slightly, I was concerned, but now that I see it, it makes sense. So
Okay.
from the picture, thank you.
You're very welcome, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Mr. Teal. Mr. Teal, do you know the use of the building then, when they make the addition, will that still remain as a garage? It'll be an accessory building, using it for a garage or a shed or storing items, that kind of thing, not as a secondary residence at any time?
That's correct. It is not an application for a secondary suite.
Further questions? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. I do have another question, and that is Mayor Dahl, through you to Mr. Teal. Because this is coming directly to council, then we probably would not have had an opportunity, or do you know if adjacent landowners were notified with regards to this application?
I don't believe they were, Your Worship, and also I don't think this is one of those uses that's clearly articulated in the land use bylaw that would require or trigger that notification to landowners compared to triggering of a decision after a decision's been made. What's unique, though, about this particular application is when we're in direct control, we'll still tell people that a decision has been made, but their appeal rights are very limited when it's a pure direct control decision that's been made by council. In other words, no one gets to appeal, other than even the applicant is a questionable one.
Supplemental?
Well, it's actually not supplemental, Mayor Dahl, just
Go
another
ahead.
question, if nobody else has one.
No, go ahead, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, and just wanted to double check with you, Mr. Teal, on whether or not there's a maximum allowable for the variance on this property or on any other properties within direct control.
No, this is I would say that council gets to step into the shoes of municipal planning commission. You're even supposed to have more control on these ones. That's hence the concept of direct control. So you're not bound by a 25% or a 50% relaxation type number that would prohibit you from considering even to 100% relaxation of a maximum standard or minimum standard.
Okay, and sorry, Mayor Dahl, this would be supplemental. So there isn't anything with regards to the amount of space the accessory building is taking up on the property, so what's the percentage of that?
So the percentage coverage is 55%, and I'm not sure if I get anything. Yeah, in the district that Marcy's bringing up, that gives you the rule. What I'm looking for is the application of the rules of this particular site. And
Yes, I thought I read it's 55%.
it is. So we have a 24 meter by 45 meter size parcel. And if you take a look at the site plan, if you go to page 86, please, Marcy. So we have an RPR that we've, staff have drawn on a little bit more accurately the dimensions that the applicants provided. So what you're seeing in the upper left-hand corner of that, the first rectangle is the existing detached garage, and then the red is the proposed addition and how that would relate to form one building. And so when you look at the overall rectangle, the overall site, which includes the corner cutoff, so that's 24 meters wide across the back, 45 meters east to west. Up to 55% of that could be covered by accessory buildings or the building's principal size. So unfortunately, I don't think we've crunched the numbers. I'm just visually looking at it. I would say we're well within the 55% parameter.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Your Worship. If we go back to picture 85 again, please, Marcy, and just comparing the real property report to what I see in the picture there, there seems to be another shed that's sitting on the south side of the house. Are those counted in the percentage of the 55%, even if they're built on skid?
Your Worship, yes. Just because you're on skids does not mean you're not part of the coverage. You're an accessory building, so that would be part of it. And yes, so there may be a distinction or difference between the date of our RPR and the more current photos that staff took within the last few weeks.
Supplemental?
Go ahead.
So in that percentage is also, is the concrete pad not included in that percentage as well?
That one, you're stretching my memory on the land use bylaw. I don't believe we do include parking, but we'd have to look it up. So if we, let's, on the assumption that we do, if we can go to the air photo again for a second. It's a little bit difficult to pick through the shadow of the trees, but right in front of the garage, if we can zoom in as much as you possibly can, we should find the pad the equivalent of 2 cars. So that would add another 600 square feet easily to our overall calculation, and whether or not we're still within the 55%.
You look on your real property report on page 86, it shows the outline of the concrete on there.
Yeah. So part of that concrete, if I do recall correctly, if it's, we may also separate the walkways and not include those in the calculation, but parking pads, and my apologies, I don't recall that part of the, we'd have to look up the definition of parking of a parcel coverage in the land use bylaw, which, if someone is able to do a quick Google search.
Do a Google search for you?
Well, actually, it's not a Google search. If we go to the town's website for a second.
We can. Waiting, Councillor Wilson?
Well, maybe I'll just.
Councillor Wilson has one on the floor, and then we can go to you if you like. Oh, okay, Councillor Cummings, he's gifted you your spot.
So, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Thiel, because this is a direct control situation and not an R1, the 55% rule, as you said earlier, was not in place. We have control to create a variance of any size we wish, right?
Your worship, yes, you certainly, so first up, the 55% rule is stated in the direct control district that council created in the DC3 directly. It's the size of the accessory buildings that we were relying on the comparison to the R1 district. But you're also correct, in direct control, even with that stated 55%, council can still look at that as a standard that can be subject to a variance.
Thank you.
Okay, so Town of Olds land use bylaw. Yep, download it. And we need it to go into the definitions for parcel coverage.
Well, I'm not familiar with your land use bylaws, the definitions at the back, because I wouldn't know them.
Definitions are at the front. After you get through the tables and tables of amendments. It's funny, we were having a chat earlier before council started about the benefits of computers versus printed manuals. Okay, so there's our question at the very bottom, or answer. Parcel coverage, if I want, I'll just bump that up a little bit. So if it's a building, it's a parking facility, so we do have to count the driving, the actual vehicle storage area, driveways, and if it was in a commercial kind of setting, we'd be counting the paved display in areas. Usually don't run into that too much for a residential. The total budget for coverage on this particular site, though, is 594 square meters, which is approximately 6,000 square feet of space. So we're at 1,100 for the garage, say 700 for the two-car parking pad, and we have to go off the RPR for house dimensions, which we don't necessarily have worked out. Plus the decks, 11 meter by 14 by 15 meters. Probably another 1,700 feet has been used up there. So we worked out to 165 square meters for those that are wondering about the metric. And then, not on the RPR, but our shed that has been spotted in our photo, which I would probably estimate is at least a 12 by 12, based on the size and scale that I can see in that photo. So probably, just for the sake of argument, say another 150 square feet. If we tally all that up.
Shed in the property, though? It had a fence and it looked like it was on the other side.
It was, actually, if you can just go back to, actually, can you take back to the computer, I guess? We'll go back to the photos, please. Yeah, and it's always interesting to try and scale that from something that's relative, but 12 by, rounding up a little bit, 12 by 12 I think is easily within the range of what that would be. So if you, I said our budget for 55% was around 6,000 square feet. And if we just walk through the items that are on the property that we can see so far, the existing and the addition, so we have to put those together to get to the 1,100 square feet. That's our first item. The parking pad, or the portions of that concrete that we see in the RPR that would be considered the driveways and the parking vehicle storage area, 700 square feet easily. The house I'm estimating at 1,700 square feet in terms of its footprint, and that includes the decks that are on the back that do count as part of the coverage. And the additional one that we do know of to the south side of the house, we're estimating at about 150 square feet. So that brings us up to around 3,650 square feet compared to that 6,000 mark for 55%. Interesting exercise to go through. It's always the side yards, when you leave them completely vacant, it's amazing how fast they add up to help with that coverage. But nonetheless, that is how the standard should be applied and checked. So
and you still have a question?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have two. One, I just want to make sure I heard correctly a couple minutes ago, Craig. There is no appeal avenue for either the applicant or the local residents, was that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so council, I guess, could have a couple options. Either approve with a condition to solicit the local resident concerns or input.
Sorry, Your Worship, Councillor Wilson may want to finish the second option. That was one.
Well, outright deny the variance, the deviation, right? Or, as I said, make it perhaps conditional on allowing residents to voice any concerns, input to the permit. or
So,
the
Your
exemption.
Worship, the second one, the decision to flat out refuse, is certainly within council's purview. The first one about seeking input prior to making a decision, if I understand that correctly, or were you suggesting that it would be approved if the others agreed?
I guess either or, either table this and wait till we get local resident input, or approve it on conditional to getting input from local residents.
Fair enough. So long as, I guess I get that correctly. So seeking the input of the other landowners in the area, and council then making a decision, is a legitimate course of action for council. Approving it subject to them neighboring landowners agreeing is not a legitimate course of action. That's basically putting them in charge of the development permit. So, but just like the development officer can seek to get additional input when they feel necessary, a development permit, council has that prerogative. For all intents and purposes, you are the development authority for this development permit.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Thiel, just remind me here, because I know my training was a little while ago. When we seek the assistance or the input of neighbors, there's a distance from the property that we look at. This would include one property owner, right? One neighbor to the south.
Actually, that little black and white sketch that, yeah, in the bylaw. Thank you.
Because there's no rear neighbors, and across the street is too far of a distance.
Yeah, we're just going to bring that up and do a quick walk around, Your Worship, if we blow up the little sketch here. So the black cube that you can see on that is the subject parcel, and what you're seeing are the parcel boundaries for the other properties around it. So when we do referrals currently under the town's land use bylaw, it's to adjacent landowners. And the definition means, adjacent means that you abut, so definitely the property to the south, they share a property line, so they would be getting a notice if we were sending out a notice under those rules. And then we ignore lanes and roadways. So arguably the two properties to the north would also get, we go kind of kitty corner off to the northwest to get to that property, and possibly up to 4 parcels on the east side of 57th, once we ignore 57th. The park directly behind to the west, because it's titled land, it's not a road or a lane, it's MR, that means those people on the other side of the park would not get the notice. So that's how we would actually, if we're sending this out, that's how we would make that determination.
You're done, Councillor Cummings? Okay. Well, I don't, Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Municipal Planner Thiels. In your estimate, how many side yard relaxations do we give in the town of Olds? Let's say in a year, or in any given amount of time, would you know?
Your Worship, unfortunately, I do not track or have that kind of figure.
I have some MPC members here. Would any of you remember? Okay. Would you have an idea, Director Greichel?
I don't have that information right now, but I could look into that information.
Well, you wouldn't be able to get that back for this decision today. I don't know where council stands on this. I know where I stand, but I hear some controversy around the table, so I would have to ask council how they feel moving forward. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think I would have more concerns with this if this property was actually butting up to directly with more municipal properties. And being that the only one that would be of any concern would potentially be the property to the south. And as this, there will be space between this building, proposed building, and the property to the south, and backing onto municipal reserve or the green space behind it. I personally don't really have any concerns with the proposed development.
I would echo your comments, honestly. I would ask around the table, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and I concur with Councillor Blatz. The other thing I'd like to add is the fact that it's within the 55%, and also it's not any bigger of a garage than we are affording the people that are in the R1. I don't know how this property in particular ended up being in direct control. I have no history on it. However, it seems to be in a residential area. If a surrounding area homes are also allowed to build garages to this size, I don't see why we would not allow this to go ahead and allow this person or this resident to build a garage similar to the size of their neighbors.
Again, I concur. The bed and breakfast was the reason that it became direct control. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Yes, I do remember the people that purchased it at that time, and they never did do it, so I would concur, and at this point, if there's no further comments, I'd ask for a motion. Or Councillor Daly, another comment?
Thank you. So thank you for your information today and in our questions, but what concerns me is that we've got an outdated RFP here, or a real property report, sorry, and that it's not showing all the auxiliary buildings that are on the property. And the other thing is the easement of the garage. This could be our opportunity to get this the existing garage within bylaws and be able to establish that easement that's required by our bylaws. So, and then they could build the new construction as well in compliance. So those are my two concerns that I have here. So, thank you.
Is it customary for them to bring a plan together without a current real property report?
Yeah, it's not necessarily the date of the real property report, it's whether or not it accurately reflects what's actually happening on the site. So even if it was an old RPR, but you hand drew in the approximate dimensions of the other shed that we can see in the air photo, that's getting you to a site plan that at least reflects what's happening on the ground currently. And the development officer does get a chance to decide what information they need or don't need to be able to move ahead. And I'm guessing, given that we were so far below on the percentage coverage, that one may not have been considered a key one.
I'm guessing the same. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Worship, and through you then to Mr. Teals. Well, based on the photos that we've had, then our development officer's already been out to this said property and taking these pictures themselves. So they would determine at that point in time, could they, or they would have or could have, at that point in time, determined if there were more accessory buildings that we should be concerned about. I would think they would bring back all the information they could to council under these circumstances.
So, Your Worship, certainly, and that also is the joy of having a GIS or geographic information system. Especially right now, your air photo is relatively current. It does get older as you go, and people do. So 4 years later, it'll be not showing the current garages. But certainly the site visits are some of the things that we do encourage as a regular routine to get a sense of what's happening on the ground compared to the materials that applicants bring into us.
Absolutely correct. Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So just to clarify, Mr. Teal, so if this particular land area property was not DC, deemed DC, and instead went through what I'll call the regular, normal MPC and process, regardless of whether it was one resident impacted or a few residents, there would have been solicitation of impact from the residents, correct?
I don't think, not for an accessory building for a relaxation. I don't think that's on the list of automatic referrals prior to decision being made. They certainly would get notice of decision after the fact. So right now, if I recall correctly in the land use bylaw, the items that get kind of prior circulation are any discretionary uses, and which usually home occupations, secondary suites. This is not an accessory residential structure is on the permitted use list. And just because they're asking for a variance doesn't necessarily trigger the request for a circulation to the neighbors prior to a decision being made. There is circulation, though, there's notification in the paper after a decision's made, and that's how people get a chance to exercise their appeal rights in a normal R1 district. Direct control does throw a wrinkle in that process.
Okay, and as we established previously, there's no appeal recourse here, so no notification or anything else.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm even wondering whether or not it's bothered at any point in putting the ad for the development permit in the paper, which we normally do, given that no one can actually appeal, but nonetheless, it's probably at least to give the notice to people, and then unfortunately, the second part of that notice is to say there's no appeal rights on direct control districts.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I feel comfortable putting a motion on the floor, if that's all right.
You please proceed.
I move that council approve development permit application 22-006 as presented, subject to the conditions listed in the attached draft development permit.
Thank you very much. We have Director Greco.
Sorry, I did receive some feedback from our development officer who couldn't be here today. So we do, to answer Councillor Daly's question, we do receive, I don't have the exact number, but a minimal amount of variances to minimum size on side yards. And the feedback that also we've received is that the buildings are mostly for people who are trying to bring those into compliance. So that's the feedback that we have received from our development officer.
It would actually be a buy and sell probably situation.
Yes, that's what I infer from
Yeah,
the responses.
absolutely.
It's
And
almost
that,
like
at that
RPR.
time, they would have to have an updated real property report and pay for it, so. We have a motion on the floor. Thank you for that information, Director Greco. Please make your decisions, and I'll start with those in favor and those opposed. That is carried. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Teal. Safe drive home. We're reverting back to page 41 now, please. Item 5C. And this is bylaw 2022-08, the supplementary tax assessment bylaw, consideration for 3 readings. Who would like to speak to this? Who have we got?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll speak on behalf of interim CAO Linderman to bylaw 2022-08 supplementary tax assessment bylaw. The background given to me was that this has been brought forward to deal with situations previously where properties were constructed and then they were taxed subsequently based on the time of year. And so what this does is it brings this more in line where when a project is completed, it allows us the ability to tax it upon that completion date, which gives a tighter reflection of the true costs of service provided to the location. So instead of being given an opportunity to operate without full taxation, it's when it's completed, it's now taxed fairly according to our bylaws. Interim CAO Linderman had provided opportunities or examples of previous costs that we were looking at anywhere between $4,000 and $5,000 of cost to the municipality or lost revenue per se in the last few years. As it seems to expand outwards towards 2019, 2018, those costs were higher. In the last couple of years, I believe the last full year was about $6,000. So it's not a major amount, but it is still substantial. It is lost revenue.
For that update. I will put on the first reading on the floor, and then I'll open for questions. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Worship. I move that supplementary assessment bylaw 2022-08 be given first reading.
Now I will open for questions. Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Those in favor, first reading? That's carried. Second reading, please. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that supplementary assessment bylaw 2022-08 be given second reading.
No further questions? Call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. And now I need unanimous consent to move forward for third reading. Counselor Walsh?
Yeah, I move that council give unanimous consent for presentation of the third reading of supplementary assessment bylaw 2022-08.
Thank you. We are looking for unanimous consent. Those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so we can't go for third reading then. And would you like to state your reason? That's my next question.
Absolutely. As this is the first time council, I believe, seen this or heard about this situation at all, I'd like to have Director Lindeman give us a more thorough explanation upon her return before I choose to pass this all the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. We will leave that for, bring that back to regular council meeting. When is it? April 11th, I believe. Thank you. Moving forward then, we will now go to item 5D, page 44 of your agenda. This is bylaw 2022-07, Olds Fiber Limited Loan Bylaw, consideration for first reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Acting CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, speaking on behalf, Loan Bylaw 2022-07, on March 14th, Council passed a motion to structure the October 21st, 2021 transfer of assets to Olds Fiber Limited as a loan which would include the redemption and repurchase of shares to a total of approximately $14 million. Being presented today is the loan bylaw, which will formalize this motion. You do need to note that in this bylaw, it is the total is for up to $15 million, and this was done to provide some leeway in order to capture all of the legal and contracted costs that the town has incurred during this process. Once all advertising requirements have been met, this bylaw will then come back to council for second and third reading, and at this time a loan agreement will be entered into which will outline the payment structure, and as per this bylaw will match the payment structure we currently have with the Treasury Board of Alberta, or previously ACFA.
Thank you for sharing. At this time then, I'd ask for permission from council. I see Councillor Cummings for first reading.
Okay. So you're asking for the motion for first?
That's correct.
Thank you. I'll put the motion that bylaw 2022-07 being a loan bylaw for the transfer of assets and redemption, repurchase of shares be given first reading.
Questions from council? Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Worship, and just for clarity and for those who would be listening in perhaps from our public, without a loan bylaw in place, the town of Olds would be responsible for all payments that would have to be made to Alberta Treasury or Alberta Finance Corporation. So I think that our residents need to realize why this is coming forward again. Thank you.
Councillor Blatz? We have first reading now on the floor. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 48, please. Item 5E, bylaw 2022-10, guarantee Olds Fiber Limited. Again, consideration for first reading. Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, I would like to move that bylaw 2022-10, being a guarantee bylaw for the purpose of securing a letter of credit for the Mountain View Power Prudential, be given first reading.
Council have questions? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just have a comment that this is just a guarantee for the line of credit, and it's not a cost to the town to do this. Sorry, Councillor Blatz, what do you think?
Letter of credit.
Your credit, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that. I will then call for the vote for first reading. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 91 of your agenda, item 6D, donation request Friends of the Olds Grizzlies. And I would, who would you like to speak to this? Sorry? Sorry?
You've gone to 6D already instead of
Did I forget something?
6A. We should start at 6A.
I'm sorry, you're right. I have a line going up to move 6C, I'm sorry. Okay, so we've done, we are now at item 6A, page 52, OFL shareholder resolution, OFL bylaw. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps I will refer to Councillor Wilson that perhaps could provide a better insight on this with his affiliation. Sorry to put you on the spot, Councillor.
Whoa!
We have a chair, Councillor Cummings, and he can help as well, and or others.
No, I think the driver for this were the two things. One being the change in title of officer within the bylaws. The bylaw for OFL, ONET, previously referenced Chief Administrative Officer as the primary officer for the organization, and we are looking to change that reference, that title, to primary officer. For one, just to avoid any confusion between the CAO of the town of Olds and the CAO of the for-profit entity. So the one driver, as I said, is a title change from Chief Administrative Officer for OFL to be known as the primary officer. And the second change was in the timing of the AGM, the annual general meeting, which in the original which in the bylaws was originally stated as April 30th, and we are looking to, in accordance with and compliance with Business Corporations Act, we are allowed 15 months from the date of the previous AGM. The previous AGM for OFL, Olds Fiber Limited, ONET, was April 8th, 2021. So we are looking to restate the bylaw to allow for 15 months from April 8th, 2021, which would require then an AGM to be held no later than July 8th, 2022. So in a nutshell, those are the two changes.
Thank you. You did such a good job. I'd ask you to put the first motion on the floor if you like.
I can do that. Council accept the recommendations from the Olds Fiber Limited Board of Directors regarding changes to the OFL bylaw number 1 as presented.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? I'd ask for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And I'd like a motion for number 2, please. Councillor Blatz.
Thanks, Your Worship. I move that council direct administration to sign the resolution of the shareholders of the Olds Fiber Limited as presented in accordance with the Town of Olds Signing Authority Policy 213C.
No questions? Good. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Page 73, please. This is Alberta Municipalities Convention Transit Resolution, and I will begin to speak to this. Okay. So this resolution is coming. We spoke and had conversation in regard and dialogue to this at our PNP meeting. The final draft has now been completed with some add-on change from Councillor Ryan to look outside funding major centers, which was a great add-on. That was appreciated. There is one other change I see that needs made in here. It does state and AUMA's advocacy. It should be Alberta Municipalities Advocacies. Am I correct? Okay, so that is the one error we need to correct. And tomorrow, if council so chooses to move forward with this, to go as a resolution to AUMA, the town of Disbury has agreed that tomorrow they will also put it on their council agenda at 2 seconds. So if we could get a motion for the first as amended and change AUMAs to Alberta municipalities. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council approve the operational transit funding for small to medium-sized municipalities resolution as amended.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just have one other change, and that was the one of the changes that I provided to Kelly through the editing process was not made, and that was on the back of 78 in the very last paragraph. So it would be an addition, and Council Daly would need to do an amendment if council agrees to the addition, which would say, in order to become part of a transit solution, while small to medium-sized municipalities have the opportunity to apply for capital funding, I put in there, in brackets, though most of what is provided is allocated to large urban centers, the operational funding mechanism and so on. So I think we need to point out that the funding, while we have the opportunity to apply to this capital funding, it rarely goes to small municipalities because most of the money goes to the large urban centers, and I think we still need to point that out. Kelly had approved that as a change, and so did you, and that did not come through on this page 78.
Please repeat that then, solely so that we can.
So that would be right after.
Capital funding?
Second line down, yeah, right after to apply for capital funding, and then put in brackets, though most of what is provided is allocated to large urban centers, in brackets.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Your Worship, and my apologies as I was away on vacation and did miss some of this conversation and back and forth, but I would personally have an issue adding that comment into this. And the reason why, because we'll have an opportunity to speak at Alberta Municipalities Conference on behalf of this, because we will be moving this, and the town of Didsbury will be seconding it. And I'm afraid that if we start to get into sort of the poor little country mouse conversation, it may not go through. And I think that from what I read, the direction is very clear here as to what we're asking for. And I just don't want it to start to get into be we feel sorry for ourselves, I guess is the best way to describe it. So I'm not comfortable having that added to this, and that's just my opinion based on that.
I would be concerned as well with the resolution that Didsbury has already noted and said that they would be happy to approve for us. And I'll like to hear what Councillor Cummings has to say.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'd actually like to go back to the First Amendment where, and again, I only have the first page that's up on the screen. I didn't bring a copy of this with me. Where is it in here that it's mispronounced as the AUMA rather than the AM?
It's not in the resolution. Thank you for that, bringing that to my attention. It's like in the background, very well, very.
So if it's not in the resolution itself, there needs to be no as amended, right?
You're 100% correct, Councillor Cummings, and thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, I believe in the whereases, especially whereas 18 Alberta municipalities out of approximately 350, and the next one where a majority of capital transit funding opportunities have been designated for those who establish systems already speaks to that. So, yeah, I don't see any need to add that in the background.
I respect Councillor Ryan's comment. However, again, we do have quite a few more opportunities to be able to put that on the floor and discuss it together, all together at the table. But I would like you to make sure that you write that down at the time so it could be brought back up. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's the reason why we are doing this resolution in the first place is because of that exact addition that I was going to make. And I'm not sure it's very clear as we kind of go off track a little bit and making this a very long-winded resolution to put on the floor. But Yeah, I mean, if we want to, if you're comfortable with speaking to it, I just want to make sure that they realize that it's the truth, that it is that the major centers are the ones that get all the money, and I don't think it's anything that the government doesn't already know, or other municipalities don't already know as well.
You, and again, I want to say that the comment that you added here in the therefore resolved does speak directly to that, to look outside funding major centers, which you just said. So we'll leave it as is, and I would ask for, we have Councillor Daly's motion on the floor at this time, and could I get a friendly amendment to say as presented, because I was reading the background and not the resolution. So a friendly amendment as presented.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd like to amend my motion to read as presented, not as amended. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Okay, I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried, thank you. And now I'm looking for a motion for the request for the town of Didsbury to second, so they can put that on their agenda for tomorrow morning. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Yes, I'll move that council requests that the town of Didsbury second the operational transit funding for small to medium-sized municipalities resolution.
All right, we're going to, looking around the table, we're good to go. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. That's moving us down now to page 91, donation request, Friends of the Olds Grizzlies.
Okay, thank you. As you may recall, back in March, the Grizzlies came and presented to council, and they were looking for a form of sponsorship. This is being brought forth as administration is recommending that a donation of $5,000 be given to the Friends of Olds Grizzlies to support the development of their training center. These funds would come out of the Summer Games Legacy Foundation, is my understanding.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask council if they have any other comments with regards to this. You've read the request for decision. And I think we will start with Councillor Daly, Councillor Blatz, and I believe did you have your hand up?
Possibly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So through our discussions at PMP and this request coming forward from the Olds Grizzly, it's come to our attention that there is a significant amount of funding that's available in the Summer Games Legacy Fund. And I believe that it would be a fair process for this council to put out requests for applications for funding that would fall within the guidelines of this Legacy Fund and distribute the funds that are in this account to the needed sports community within the town of Olds.
I believe acting CAO would like to speak, and then Councillor Blatz. I believe you're referring to alternative number 3 on our RFD.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So, yes, if in conversation with the PNP about taking that senior or the Games Legacy Fund and wrapping it up for sure, and opening those opportunities up to all sporting recreation opportunities in town, I think would give a wholesale opportunity for everybody to have equal share and response to the funding request. And based on community need, then that would be a equitable way of doing so, and we could certainly outline that through an engagement process through the town to those agencies.
Blatz?
Thank you, Worship. Those were going to be my comments. I feel it's a much better process to do it fair and equitably, although I would support the idea of what the Grizzlies, Friends of the Grizzlies, are trying to do for development and training of their minor hockey and their own players. But I would much prefer to see us spread this out amongst the community and make it fair and equitable.
Thank you. I concur after some deep thoughts that alternative option number 3 would be best, as we've been sitting on these funds from the Mountain View Summer Games Legacy Foundation for many, many years, and I believe there's about $28,000 left in 23, yes, because we did provide some money to our wrestler, Danielle. I'd still open the floor to any further comments before I ask for the motion to direct administration to explore. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I agree with the comments of Councillor Daly, Councillor Blatz, and the recommendation number 3. My comment would be, I do value and agree with what having a junior hockey franchise brings to the town and what the Grizzlies bring to the town. And I do realize their initiative is more than just an athletic facility. But I also look and say we have the CLC, which is a fitness center, and I think can cater to elite type athletes as well as the everyday weekend warrior. And I think there's also in town there's a for-profit fitness facility. Well, there are many for-profit fitness facilities, including one out in the Imperial area, I think. So I'm just cautious. I know the Grizzlies are well underway in terms of what they're doing, and their facility is more than just a fitness center. But as I said, we do have options, and I agree with approach number 3, recommendation number 3. Let's throw this open to other organizations as well. Thanks.
Did you still, Councillor Cummings, and then CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. So there's one thing I'm going to encourage us to vote for number 3 here, but when we do direct administration to do so, I would like to see one process done for all $23,000 at once. And just to make sure that that's the way that could be worded rather than piecemeal it again and just open it up annually or something like that. This is just going to be a disbursement of this entire $23,000. I do want to bring back to our PMP meeting a conversation where I believe I said quite clearly that we have this money and it needs to get out there. So at that time I was very supportive of the $5,000 donation recommendation for the Olds Grizzlies, and I hope that they, if we do put this, not if, when we do put this proposal out there, that they are invited to participate in it again, because that's what triggered this whole process to get the $23,000 out there.
Acting CEO, Andrew?
And just a recommendation from administration in putting this out for public interest, I think that it would be wise that we could formulate some type of a scoring matrix that would provide a point system or such where things, for example, of the most benefit for most. So, you know, any kind of a proposal where you're going to attract multiple groups to one venue or different areas of community benefit, whether it's economics or community service, anything like that. And so I think that by putting those kind of metrics in the scoring process, you could see an organization such as what the Grizzlies proposed with their Grizzly Den, that might give them an opportunity for you know, a stronger application for sure than if it was a single sport, single location type activity.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and Acting CAO. Took the words right out of my mouth. I think it's definitely something that we would need to have some kind of a scoring basis for, and certainly I am quite supportive of the Grizzly request, because they were going outside of, it's not just for the Grizzlies, it's for minor hockey as well as other minor sports could use their facility that they're creating over there. So I do think a scoring is important, and but I'd also like to make sure that we do this in a expedient manner so that we're not just sitting on this for several months.
Mr. Blatz?
Well, it does state right in option number 3 that we would report back to council at the June's policies and priority meeting. And I think that would give everybody ample time and still within time to start and disperse these funds probably by mid to late fall.
Time for applications. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you. Could we maybe change that, if we're going to make that as a motion and say at the latest, the June policies and procedures meeting? That way if administration can do it quicker and have it for the May one, then that gives them the opportunity. If we word it this way, and say it has to be done in June, then we're restricting them. If we say no later than the June PMP meeting, if they get it done faster, they can get it done faster. So I'd like to have more option there than just saying a specific. So at
Yeah.
that point, if it's okay, can I put a motion on the floor?
Have a response from Acting CAO Andrew?
Sorry, Councillor Cummings, I just want to clarify what you're asking, that you would, you propose that administration would have a grant system ready to propose to you for that PMP, or are you actually asking for the grants to be ready to distribute it? I just want to make sure I'm not setting ourselves up for the wrong intent.
All right, so what the motion that we would read in my mind would be exactly the way number 3 is worded, except that where we say report back to council no later than the June policies and procedures or priorities committee meeting. I don't like having a dot in the sand. I'd rather have it open, that we can go May if you get it done before May. And again, it would be for the developing of the community grant program, so however much you can do, not necessarily the issuing of the grants, that's something we'd have to approve at some point, but no, just change that so it opens it up in case you get it done faster.
Councillor Daly?
So, thank you, Your Worship. So, yeah, as far as with item number 3, and Councillor Cummins' comments on the June deadline, we would not be able to approve any until such time we had an end date for the applications to make sure that the process is fair. Am I reading you right there, Councillor Cummins?
No, so this is, I believe the wording of this part 3 alternative is to ask administration to develop a plan, a process, and bring that back to us for approval so we can have the grant system approved. Then they would initiate the activity, advertise it to the community, have the applications submitted, then we would, somebody, a committee of whoever or whatever, or town staff would approve those and then disperse the $23,000 funds. That process would all be developed at some point and then brought to council. The way the wording is it would be brought back to council at the June Policies and Priorities Committee. What I'm saying is take away the just change it no later than, so in case they get this whole package put together for us to look at in May, then we can see it at the May PMP and then approve it so that they can go through the whole process of administering or creating the actual program.
Almost like FCSS funding. When they get all the applications in, bring it to PMP, we approve it, comes back, we go over it and then we approve.
No, that's not what I mean at all. So the wording is basically, if you use your FCSS analogy, is they're going to go create the FCSS. They're going to come back to us at a Policy and Priorities Committee and say, this is the process. Then we're going to say, yeah, that process sounds great, go do it. Then at the next PMP meeting, however that process works, they'll come back with the list that they believe is of the whatever, and we'll approve it, and there goes the $23,000. So the first stage is where we're at now, is with them just coming up with the program. We have to approve the program, and instead of just saying June, say no later than June, so if they have it done in May, they can do it in May.
Well, you've said the motion now 3 times. Do you want to really put it on the floor?
Yes, I do. So I would put the motion out to direct administration, to explore developing a community grant program to allocate the remaining funds from the disbursement of the Summer Games Legacy Foundation and report back to council no later than the June Policies and Priorities Committee meeting.
Does that help you, Councillor Daly? Any further questions? All right, we have a motion on the floor. Are there any further questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? Thank you. Very well done. That is carried. 94, does anybody need a recess for 5 minutes at all? We are going to take a 5-minute recess. Thank you very much. Okay, we're reconvening back to regular council. And its reports, page 94, please. Oh, who wants to start first? Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'd just like to report on my last month's activities. First of all, involved with the search for the CAO, and also involved in OFL board meetings, and attended the CAO's farewell function as well. And then also I attended Olds Chamber of Commerce AGM as well as the regular council and PMP meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I do have a little bit of news to pass on from the Red Deer River Municipal Users Group. They've asked all of us to share some information about our water source, basically. I'm going to tread a little bit here onto the Mountain View Regional Water Services Commission's purview. Sorry, Darren. Just because it's an integral part of our community and the Red Deer River. So, and again, some of us may know this already. So the Red Deer River allotment, that means the amount of water that we're allowed to take out of the Red Deer River, is currently sits at 550,000 decameters cubed. Big number. It's an awful lot of water, which is about a third of the total water flow in the river, of which we're only actually allotted or licensed to give out 293,000. So when we look at Mountain View Regional Water Services, they're licensed to take 13,343 decameter cubed out of the water. And that services the 30,000 people in Bowden, Carstairs, Crossfield, Didsbury, Innisfil, and Olds. But they're only currently taking 3,650 decameters cubed out of the water, so about 27% of the license, which gives us an incredibly large area of growth from that water license. Whether the facility can handle more or not, I don't know. That's Councillor Wilson's issue. Some of the other information they wanted us to pass on was Dixon Dam. So Dixon Dam currently can hold a maximum of 203,000 decameters, which, if you go back to a number I used earlier, is almost the entirety of the licensed water withdrawal in a year. And they control, using their gates and stuff, the flow in the river, so that all year long the flow of the river has a minimum of 16 cubic meters per second. And they've got 3 power generating turbines in that facility to add a little bit of power. And 2 other things here. So we had Environment and Parks come and have a presentation to us about their weather analysis from the fall, winter, and moving into the spring. It took about a half an hour, but in short term, it's lots of snow in the mountains, not so much snow in the plains, tons of snow in the north, and there's no water concerns at all in our region in consideration of the water flow down the river. The farmers might disagree, but lots of water in the river anyways. 3 big projects on our waterway. $55 million was given to Drumheller for flood mitigation. $18 million were given to the Red Deer Water Treatment Plant for upgrades and sediment control. And Sundry has been developing and is installing a water treatment plant of their own. It's an electrocatalytic modular system, and they are looking for wastewater, not water treatment. Which makes sense since I read electrocatalytic and I know what that means. So it's a modular system, so it's like a little sea can that'll just be dropped in situ and then hooked up and go, and they're built in Saskatchewan. And they're looking to give tours of the facility. So it was a very informative meeting, and they wanted to make sure we all gave the same information to our councils.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Worship. Well, mine's very short and sweet. I attended our CEO conversation, regular council meetings, an Olds Police Advisory Committee meeting, MPC, and the Indigenous Blanket Ceremony. And I also did attend the Alberta Municipalities Conference, and I found that to be very beneficial. So thank you all.
Thank you very much for your report. And who would like to start at this end? Councillor, yeah, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll be fairly brief. Just a couple things. One relative to the Mountain View Region Water Commission. We are having a full-day budget forward-looking planning session coming up on Saturday, April 23rd, and that's where we'll be doing our multi-year plan. I think it's about a 10-year plan, and touches somewhat on Councillor Daly's comment relative to the current intake of water off the Red Deer River, but obviously and importantly, sorry, Councillor Cummings? Yes, sorry. Councillor Cummings. And speaks to the current intake for the Water Commission and the communities, but also looking forward as far as economic development and growth, commercial-wise, residential-wise, and a forecast of what those future water needs are going to be for all the communities serviced by the Mountain View Region Water Commission. So a full-day session coming up at the end of September, and we had a preliminary planning discussion as part of our monthly meeting a couple weeks ago. And the only other thing of note is it was early March. I sat in on a webinar sponsored through CAPE relative to the Immigrant Entrepreneur Program, and interim CEO Linderman has updated via an email a couple weeks ago concerning Old's participation. We have registered with the provincial government to participate in that program. Now there are just a few items to clarify as far as going forward, what that participation is going to look like, and when interim CEO returns, certainly ask her to give us an update, either herself or with the Economic Development Officer for Olds. That's about it. Thanks.
I have a question. Are you talking about the Entrepreneur Stream community?
Yes.
It's in our agenda on item D for correspondence.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Walsh?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I keep it simple and sweet. Yeah, attended PMP meetings and budget information meetings last week, along with, CEO council meetings. One meeting, the library had their AGM, so that was a very short meeting. You all seen the presentation the week before, so I got to see it a second time, so that was their AGM. Done within an hour, so that was a quick meeting. They did have a slight, I guess, surplus because of COVID and that, but they put that into their reserves to help bring it up to that 30% of operating costs, so that was a positive out of that. Other than that, we attended the ICC meeting on Friday, and you'll be hearing more of that in the future.
You, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I have prepared a written report. It's 3 pages. I'll circulate it through email. I did attend the Leadership Caucus up in Edmonton and found it very beneficial. They talked about several of the issues that are major issues that are affecting our communities, including the Alberta Police, Provincial Police Service, the Emergency Medical Services made a presentation, as well as the Municipal Financial Health and the LGFF, which I speak to within my report, so I'm not going to go over that. The same day we came back, we had the Olds Policing Advisory Committee. We had a presentation by the Olds Restorative Justice Committee, which deals with youth justice. The committee's mission is to ensure young people are held accountable for their criminal behavior. So it was a very interesting presentation. I didn't even know that we had a youth justice committee in our town in the last 4 years. We've not even heard anything about them, but And either was the staff sergeant until somebody said, oh, we have that committee. And he went, what? And then, yeah. So anyway, very interesting presentation from them. And the Olds Police Advisory Committee Chair will be making a presentation in April at our PMP. Mountain View Seniors Housing, I chaired their board meeting on March 24th. We had a presentation of our auditors. We had a clean audit, and we were very pleased with that as well. The auditors were pleased that we're going in the right financial direction. The board continued to discuss the Alberta 10-year affordable housing strategy, which includes a couple of things that this council should discuss in the future, which is competency requirements for the board, which I sat in on a provincial information session earlier in the month with regards to that, those requirements, and I presented a report to the board with regards to that, so I have a complete report on that if anybody wants to look at that as well. And also the housing needs assessments, and they want municipalities to basically do a housing needs assessment. Now, this housing needs assessment has been done by Mountain View Seniors Housing about 4 years ago, so it's out of date a bit. Apparently, what we need to do is possibly discuss as a council maybe a strategy as how we're going to do this, but the province, of course, is not providing any funding to do this, and they want the municipalities to buy into it, but there's no funding available at this point, and I would highly doubt if there would be, but we'll see about that, and I think we'll have to have a discussion, and certainly it could be something that we could partner with all of the other communities and provide something at MAP perhaps. Mayor Dahl, perhaps you and I can chat about that and an idea going forward on that. The other thing we talked about was senior advocacy, and in particular the Alberta Seniors Benefit Program. This is a program that allows, is basically provided to all seniors in the province, including those who are in our 24/7 care. However, it's not provided to the seniors in our lodges. And that is what part of our requisition goes to. So if the Alberta government did actually pay for that, we wouldn't have to pay such a high requisition. Just saying. And the resolution, we'd like to provide a resolution to municipalities within our Mountain View region to try to get them to all sign on board a resolution that could possibly be presented at Alberta Munis or at RMA with regards to us in the province to treat all the seniors in our province the same and to treat them fairly. And they're not doing that right now. So that would possibly become forward as long as we get that done in time. We should be able to. Otherwise, I just participated in everything else. The Indigenous Blanket Ceremony, PMP, regular council, budget talks, CEO conversation, and OFL board meeting. Thank you.
Okay, it's been like a very busy time, so I'm going to be short and sweet as well. But this is all I attended, so everything else was going through my emails and trying to just answer emails like everybody else. Mayor's South Central was held in Didsbury. Roundtable dialogue ongoing of mutual concerns to our municipalities and areas. We all share commonalities. The town of Didsbury, you're all aware of this already, has agreed to second the Town of Olds resolution re the operational transit funding for small to medium-sized municipalities. So we'll move that, we'll contact the mayor and tell her everything's a go for that. Mayor's Reeves Central Alberta first gathering of Reeves and Mayors was held in Red Deer this month. The history was shared of the establishment of the original Mayors meetings that were started, and with the invitation to invite the Reeves starting in 2004, who were not originally invited as part of the group. We set the agenda for the upcoming year. Mayor of Penhold, Mike Yargo, agreed to chair and provide the administration support for our quarterly meetings. So we have 4 meetings a year. And they did open the floor. Mayor Yargo, did note that within any time, if somebody wanted to move the meetings out of Red Deer, I think they're going to just be held at ABC. It's the largest space and had a big enough space that they could possibly do it elsewhere. Again, the Indigenous blanket exercise was held with staff and council at our operations center, March 18th, which is also a full moon, by the way, if anybody wanted to know. Elder Sinclair and Mountain View Moccasin House Society led the blanket exercise. I believe the sharing circle education and dialogue was very rewarding, especially for myself. CEO conversation, and the one item that we all did agree to talk about was the Coyote Champions Cup. We discussed that amongst ourselves regarding how council availability and role will look like, and we're still trying to finish the tail end of those, and we do have volunteers here that are helping us. So, budget review, yes, 2 days. I wish to thank our administration for the extensive effort put into the preparation of our budget process to date. And again, our Intermunicipal Cooperation Committee met with Mountain View County. Our Olds ICC appointed members will further discuss with all council some items of importance and bring a request for decision to a future council meeting. And that's all I have to report. Thank you. Questions with regards to anything here before we move on? Hearing none, thank you very much. We'll move on then, and I'd ask for a motion, please, to accept the reports from council boards, committees, and commissions. Right.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that the reports from council authorities, boards, committees, and commissions ending March 28, 2022 be received for information.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Right, moving down now to no quarterly financial position update, and item 9, page 101 is correspondence. Item 9A, correspondence and information. So on page 101, does council have any questions in regards to any of these? Again, the item Councillor Wilson was asking about is item D, which I received and asked to have this put in the agenda. I noticed that they said in the letter also to be aware that you would start to receive inquiries from potential entrepreneurs. I can share that on the way down to the meeting, I did ask our was she Economic Development Officer. She said she's very busy right now with several inquiries. So the process is working. That's all I know to date. Any other questions on this with regards to the items? Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Mont. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just have a question. I see the correspondence we got with regards to the Olds College support, and I know that you had mentioned that our county reps were bringing that forward as a resolution to RMA. I heard that it didn't go through as an emergent issue.
Well, I never got an update, actually, to tell you the truth. Nobody told me a thing about it, but I guessed that myself because I didn't see anything about it.
I actually talked to 2 county councilors after our Mountain View Seniors Housing meeting earlier, late last week, and they said that it didn't come through as an emergent issue. So I was just wondering whether or not there would be something that we would maybe share, or maybe the county could share their resolution that they had with us, and perhaps we can bring that forward to for a resolution for Alberta municipalities.
Actually like to do that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I actually thought the same thing, and actually went after we were done our ICC meeting, we did a little bit of map update, and it never came up, and I never asked because I forgot to. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll see if I could get that information. I'd like to know why it didn't go, because I know it was supposed to be an emergent resolution, and it didn't happen. So Councillor Blatz?
Well, they may follow somewhat the same process we do, and perhaps maybe they will be bringing it back to their fall conference, and at the spring conference, they may not have felt at this time it was emergent and they could potentially be bringing it back later, so we should get clarification on that.
Because we have had that issue happen with us as well in the past, where we were going to do an emergent and didn't go. So it's good to get clarity on that. Thank you for that, bringing that to our attention. I'll get the information for everyone. Anything else on here? If not, oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to take us back a little ways to the rural immigrant program. And yes, I was aware of the correspondence that was part of the package. Where I was going with it, though, was there was supposed to be a delegation from Central Alberta going to India. And initially, that delegation was supposed to go, I thought, towards the end of March. And I think as interim CEO Linderman indicated in her email a couple weeks ago, that delegation and their timelines has been deferred, postponed. So I was just looking for an update, a confirmation as to when that delegation is going, if they're still going, what the timing was, and what that looks like. I do check the Government of Alberta's eligibility page every couple of days because, yes, as they indicate in their letter, they do update with various communities that have completed the enrollment process. I think when I looked a couple of days ago, there were about a dozen communities throughout Alberta, of which we were listed as one of them. But I would like to hear from either our economic development focal or interim CEO when she returns, what that looks like as far as that delegation leaving for India.
If the acting CEO had anything brought up from our interim CEO, and is there any update on that?
It's very limited, Your Worship, that, yes, that trip was postponed. There's no definitive date attached to that information. She did indicate that within 1 day of being accepted into that program, they had already been contacted by one investor, which is obviously shadowed now by a dozen or more, and they had also been contacted by an immigration consultant, which shows even deeper interest in the area. So those are all positive things coming from there.
Very much, yeah. Thanks for that update, acting CEO Andrew, and appreciate that. Thanks. Good news.
I'm certain that between our acting and our interim CEO, they'll be asking more questions to keep us in the know. Thanks. If there's nothing else, a motion please to accept what are we accepting here? Yep, correspondence, please. There we go. Did somebody put their hand up and I missed it? Okay, Councillor Cummings.
Jump on that one. Okay, I'll put the motion that the correspondence and information report ending March 28th, 2022 be received for information.
Councillor Cummings. Any further questions? Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And a motion for adjournment. Oh, look at that. Councillor Blatz beat you, Councillor Daly. So we're adjourning at 3:05 p.m. Those in favor? That's carried. And I would just ask Council if you could step back for about 5 minutes with me, please.